That's right back, Charlie.
Because you always use that active when defenders are being given like.
People deluded, I'm back again.
Come on, Ian. Man. Come on. As the big man just said there, people deluded. I'm back again. I've got the tactical genius of Harvey back in the building. If you're not subscribing to his channel, then make sure you have, people. The guy deserves 1 million subscribers. Big fan of his content, and I'm ecstatic to have him here again, especially because after the result, man, we say, my guy, you in good spirits? I hope so.
Mate, I am so good, and I hope you are too. I think there's been a couple of proof in the pudding moments for Arteta on his way so far as Arsenal manager, and I think this is probably the crescendo of them all right now. So yeah, I'm living on a high right now, and I'm sure you are as well, man.
Yeah, man, you know, I still think I'm in a dream. Like when 90 minutes came, I had to pinch myself and slap myself and thought, I'm not dreaming, this is actually reality. You basically said there about, you know, proof in the pudding and that sort of segment. Let's get straight into it. What do you specifically mean by that for Arteta?
It was, I think we've had a lot of moments where not quite a turning point, but there's been a clear direction conveyed by a certain result and a confirmation that we're on the right track. And I think not just now going toe-to-toe with Pep Guardiola, but overcoming him, that certainly is a moment that now Arteta beaten all 24 Premier League sides that he's faced, he can certainly start to build on. And I think there was so much as well from the performance that was so much more than just a deflected goal, right? It was such a close game. I think the quality of the game, certainly in that second half, even though some people might look at the 0-0, was probably the highest that I've seen, certainly in a Premier League game this season, maybe more long term. And the fact that I think it came down to two sides trying to bully each other over the transition showed how little there is now to split the team, certainly tactically. So you have to try and get that ascendancy in the final. And look, I think that, yeah, we're at a real sticking point now in terms of the two sides. And it's going to come down to all of these fine margins across the season.
I think you're bang on the money. It's going to come down to fine margins. I think since the moment Mikel Arteta walked in, like you cast your mind back to when he walked into a mess, you could see the players that he did want to keep. Even when, obviously, right now you can look at Arsenal, you can see it's rosy, you can praise Mikel Arteta, you can praise the players. It's very easy to see that now, but there was a time where it wasn't. And that's where I'm a big fan of Arteta, because he's obviously made mistakes and had bumps along the road and probably question marked himself and things like that. But internally, definitely in the all or nothing kind of season, you could see Benjamin White and many other players talk about this man, talk about what he wanted to see. You go back to when he first walked in the door, there was times where you could see what he wanted to implement, but he just simply didn't have the players, or the players weren't good enough, or they had an inability to do things. And I do think in the last couple of games against Pep Guardiola, well, obviously we've won the last 2 games, but even when we've lost, it's come down to fine margins and ultimately ruthlessness. And I think we've it's probably a bit too early to say we've overcome it, because if it was a football game, we played 13 games, it'd still be 12-1. But based on that game, you're only as good as your last game. I agree with what you said. It shows that we can go toe-to-toe. I did think both teams kind of cancelled each other out. I think the biggest thing for me was, you know, when you play Man City, maybe not so much in the Emirates game, but there's times where you're going to be under the cosh. They're going to have hairy moments. But I loved how we stayed consistent in our belief. I know Raya's getting a lot of stick for his kicking, for example, and it weren't the best initially.
Can't believe that.
Exactly. You're not alone. I did think initially it did look a bit shaky, but again, Mikel Arteta is telling him to do things, and he grew in confidence. And for every shaky pass or shaky moment, there was also brilliant moments, especially to Gabriel Jesus. So I do like how we stick to the plan. I think the greatest thing for me was Declan Rice clearing that effort off the line. I don't know what Rai was doing there, but we was growing in a lot of confidence. And as you said, the second half, that was where I looked at it and we thought, yeah, City are a fantastic team. We'd love to be them, but they bleed just like us. They're human just like us. It just came down to who wanted it. And to see 11 players in their own half, 10 men behind the ball. Arsenal kind of up in the ante. Martin Odegaard wanting it. Gabriel Jesus wanting it. As you said, really, you know, it don't really care about a deflected goal. I don't think Arsenal can win because had we have lost, you know, the negative connotations. Obviously, we've won. They say, oh, it weren't a brilliant performance. But then other teams get praised for winning ugly. And it was amazing to see Pep make 3 subs. Arteta say, okay, I'm going to make 3 subs. And 4 of the subs to go with Martinelli all involved. And what a goal it was from Thomas Partey to Tommy Asu to Havertz. And obviously, Gabriel Martinelli to make the business, man. So kind of set it up. Do you think now this is now a mark of Arsenal now? This is now where we kick on. This is now where we believe that we can go toe-to-toe with City and challenge them for things?
Absolutely. I think for me, it was already there, but certainly there's only so much, you know, tactical foundation, sort of core belief within a squad can do until you put that into practice on the pitch. Certainly now that we've done that in the Premier League, of course. I mean, I find it's quite cliche to call it a tactical chess match, but as you yourself alluded to there, one manager seemed to make a change and the other one reacted, and I think moves and counter moves were an absolutely integral part of how the game went, and it was so fascinating to watch, not just from a fan's eye, but a more analytical perspective, because like I said at the start, people may look at the 0-0, they may look at the deflected goal, a 1-0 win and think it wasn't all that. But really, if you look into it, it was just because of all that. Because they're
results that win you a trophy anyways.
Exactly. And it was so close and so tight that was the only difference that you could split between the two sides.
Bro, Pep had 4 shots. City had better yet had 4 shots. Like, come on, regardless of Rodri or Kevin De Bruyne, of course they would have made a difference, but we also missed players. And you could argue the impact of our players not being there or players not being fully fit, it impacts us a bit more because City can still put out of a competitive side. They're treble winners and things like that. Of course, City weren't at their free-flowing best. I was a bit shocked personally at the lack of tempo with them, but that's for them really and truly. So I think you're bang on the money with what you're saying, man.
I mean, I guess I've got something to say for the tempo because it was something that Pep certainly had in mind right at the start. Part of the reason for, you know, them trying to balance out the obviously not having Rodri at the core of that midfield, he sort of changed their structure, Pep. Normally you see Rodri right in the centre, but they changed it to more of a 2-3 build-up structure.
Yeah, Bernardo dropping in kind of being the kind of link with Lewis.
And it was Bernardo in that deepest role in the 6, and then Lewis on the right-hand side of him, Kovacic on the left. And this was basically to try and crowd that midfield with as much technical quality as possible to, of course, make up for Rodri. But I think it showed that Pep placed so much priority, certainly in how he planned the game to pan out, in was getting an initial control of the game in those deeper areas. Because it was interesting that you saw Gvardiol and Walker both holding the width for Manchester City like nominal wingers would in possession, and it does seem strange, but like I said, there is a reason, because by crowding
players in the pockets,
by crowding that deep midfield, of course he wants to prioritize initial control in the game. He wanted to suck Arteta's man-man press in, which we started to initially press Man City in, and then expose that space in between the lines by either getting Foden on the half turn, like we saw for the Cole Palmer goal in the Community Shield.
You saw Foden play? I didn't see him or Haaland in that game, bro. Crazy. You must be really good at analytics, bro.
Or, like I said, sucking that Arsenal press on, playing long to Haaland, and then winning those knockdown second balls that Alvarez has excelled in this season, but De Bruyne excelled so well in against Arsenal in both fixtures last season. So exposing that space in between the defensive and midfield lines in Arsenal's outer position structure is something Pep wanted to have join, and it's something that quite a few teams, if you want to target in a specific Arsenal in a specific area, because they're so good out of possession, that is the one territory, because we can be so aggressive and so suffocating when we choose to go man to man. But at times, if we have sort of that hybrid 4-4-2, 4-1-4-1 structure, if we have Partey or Jorginho in that one splitting the lines, of course Partey isn't as mobile as he once was, and Jorginho is what he is, and that can be a potential area where you can expose us. I mean, the Jorginho yellow card 10 minutes in, Foden on the half turn, that's what Pep wanted to do. But
we got Jorginho for getting through that as well, man.
And a brilliant performance from Jorginho. I think his sort of balance between retention in those early phases, but also giving us a bit of cuteness in the final phase. He, often pulling away to that right hand side, those like clipped vertical balls in to bring either Jesus in behind or White on the overlap.
Facts.
Was quite a nice implementation, something that he certainly brings that in that sort of number 6 role, that although Partey has that verticality in him, it's more with deeper ranges, as we saw with the Martinelli goal. But I'll get back to that. Arteta moves and counter moves. He then went into that more passive 4-4-2 block and sort of mixed in with that man-man press with sort of Nketiah, Ødegaard were on the Man City centre-backs. Rice was sort of more positionally maintained to stick on Bernardo Silva. And then the wingers for Arsenal were sort of positioned on either side of that midfield 3 for City, right? And Gvardiol was given as that left man. I think all of our pressing angles, the whole game, it was so interesting that we tried to funnel them out to Gvardiol, Man City out to Gvardiol and out to Kovacic the whole time. Potentially a less dynamic side in terms of off the ball movement for City. Similar, again, I go back to the Community Shield because there's so many similarities we can take from that.
A lot of similarities.
Like we funneled the ball out to Akanji with our pressing angles, trying to get that out to him. And it's a risk and reward because White was also man-marking Foden in between the lines quite often in that half space. So Gvardiol, as we saw a couple of times, could overlap and could get in. But look, when you're playing such 2 top sides, you have to sacrifice something to gain in another area. And that was a risk and reward that Arteta ultimately took. And look, out of possession, I've been the biggest plaudit of Arsenal out of possession this season. We're one of the best around at it. And I think as well, in that real compact shape with Jorginho and Rice in the double pivot midfield, I think you'll struggle to find 2 better sort of coordinators of space there. Rice with his real springiness into the tackle, and Jorginho. People can say what he wants about him, but his IQ and his defensive IQ, his interceptions, and actually winning duels has been exceptional and second to none throughout his whole career. It was just about, of course, how Arsenal use the ball when they turn it over, as we spoke on last week, and as I've been critical as of in how mature we've been in how we've used the ball when we've turned it over. But we were much better against Manchester City, and there was a show that there's a bit more nous and a bit more maturity coming into the Arsenal play. So that was really the first half, trying to find ways to temper Man City in a way, and we really did that quite well. And then obviously the second half, I don't know how you thought, how happy you were with the approach we took early on.
Yeah, man. Like for me, bro, I would say, as I said earlier, like, bro, I was excited about the second half. The second half for me was really where I was like, yes, this is the Arsenal I want to see.
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to really put it down to a point, I'd probably say probably about 3 minutes before we scored and actually how we saw it through to the end. But I'd say the first 10 minutes of that second half, because obviously that sets the tempo. I wish I could be a fly on the wall in games like this and hear exactly what was said in the change room, because as you saw that we as you said, with risk and reward, it's like we took the risk, we increased our risk, but we increased our reward. We took the handbrake off. But as much as it's about tactics, it's about mentality. You have to believe. And I think there's been times where players haven't believed in what Arteta is doing. You know, you look at Raya is getting a lot of stick for the kicking, and I think there is legitimacy with the fans with the kicking, but at the same time you need the temperament. It's very easy to be a team that plays out from the back where teams are just sitting off, you've got a bunch of space. We all know City press well. As you said, it is an interesting matchup on the ball between these sides. Off the ball is what makes the difference in any football match, and Pep and Arteta are very vocal on that, and you could kind of see that with the way they were trying to press Raya, and I think Raya did well. I think he had a couple of nervy moments generally. The Julian Alvarez thing, obviously I don't know where he was diving for, where Rice cleared the shot off the line. There was naturally, there's going to be a couple of dodgy passes, but I think his passing grew. I think his temperament was great, and I think the discipline simply to stick to what Mikel Arteta is telling you to do, even if you don't necessarily believe it's the right thing. He's telling you to keep playing those balls, keep delaying on the ball to kind of invite pressure, invite a trigger press, and kind of do things. As I said, there are going to be times, I think he kind of sold Rice short for one. There's going to be times you get caught out, but I think Raya did quite well. And to be honest, the whole back five to keep a clean sheet, actually keeping up the theme with the back five are our defenders, because, you know, Martinelli's the poster boy, and it's easy to kind of praise the likes of Martinelli, Declan Rice at things like that. But games like this, I think you have to focus a bit on the defenders. A clean sheet against City, a clean sheet at the Emirates against City, it's unheard of. What did you make of the three fullbacks, you know, because you had Tomiyasu moving like a Japanese Jordi Alba. You obviously had Zinchenko, done very well defensively, and Benjamin White on his birthday. Best birthday present ever. What did you make of the fullbacks, man?
Fullbacks, again, just as the whole back line, I was very, very impressed by them. I'm going to start on Zinchenko because in a weird way, although at times he was exposed last season, right, 1v1, if you actually compare his time last season and how many times he actually had to defend, and then his time at Man City, he's actually improved defensively in the duel quite a lot. Right?
He has no choice.
Exactly, he has no choice. But I would say, I think the abundant thing that comes from the Man City result is how Zinchenko's role, we don't have to be as dependent on him inverting into midfield. And I talk about
there's other angles all over the field.
Yeah,
now.
I talk about this quite a lot. And in my most recent video, how Arteta's trying to get this
make sure you check that out, folks.
Manchester City defeating blueprint, if you want, that sort of tactical framework that is prepared for Guardiola's Man City. And with Rice in the left-hand sided 8, if you will, acting as that secondary controller, he can either drop into the pivot next to Jorginho. We're not as dependent with those two natural controllers there, and Ødegaard can drop deeper if he wants, if Rice roams higher. On a fullback, inverting, and you can kind of have what Pep's done at times. You can start with 4 quasi centre-backs straight away in your back 4. We could play Kivior, for example, at left-back. And I'm not dismissing how integral Zinchenko is and how integral he will continue.
No, you're simply just saying the system, it takes what Zinchenko does well at, and it's more like an accessory rather than that's our reliance on our creativity and ultimately ball play. And that's the natural evolution. You're bang on the money.
It's only a good thing as well, because
exactly.
Of course, I think Timber elevates us to another level because obviously not only can he move into the midfield from either side, but he can play that more conservative outside centre-back role. So that gives us
physically in duels as well.
Yeah, a host of other options. So I think this City blueprint, and of course we'll get on to Havertz, to Martinelli, to the attack a bit later. So I won't get touch on them quite yet. But this Manchester City blueprint, building in that 4-2-4, Rice and whoever is +1 alongside him can stay in that pivot the whole time. You can start with those 4 quasi centre backs, and then 4 sort of transitionary weapons up front. So I think it gives us a lot of different ways to be good in the transition, going both ways, attack and defence, and gives us the control in midfield. Of course, you can add Zinchenko on top of that, and then you're talking sort of an uber technical side. But it's good now that we're seeing a side, and we're finally seeing a side with either Rice and another natural controller in the side together that is moving away on sheer dependency and becoming as unpredictable as we ultimately can be.
And I mean, you're right. You're bang on the money with what Mikel Arteta said as well. He wants us to be unpredictable, and I think fans have to be prepared. And I think Arteta, obviously, I do think his hands was a bit forced. Martinelli and Partey probably weren't fit enough to start the game necessarily. I do think, his use of Jorginho generally is right. I know Jorginho probably shouldn't have entered the fray against Spurs. We should probably have another player that could be there. But when it's more of a football match, as stupid as that sounds, or a chess match, that's where Jorginho... Yeah, exactly. That's where Jorginho comes into his own. And I did like how we finished the game. What did you make of Benjamin White? Because I know Doku didn't start, and I did like how Mikel Arteta almost immediately brought on Tomiyasu when Doku came on. But Benjamin White, that was an area people like, yeah, you're going to have a tough game and all of this sort of stuff. I think Benjamin White did well. And I genuinely feel, obviously, when we'll get on to Saliba and Gabriel, but when you're next to Saliba, like nobody is going to really get their plaudits. But that is 50 million well spent. Benjamin White goes from strength to strength every game, and he's very versatile. I don't think he'll play in midfield, but he has that in his locker. Obviously, he can play centre half. He spent a year there, and I think at fullback he's brilliant. He's almost a hybrid in that he's not quite a fullback and he's not quite a centre back. He's a bit of both, really, and I think he typifies what Mikel Arteta wants. I think when you play like Benny Blanco, you don't need to watch football, as some people tried to get onto about. So, what did you make of Benjamin White in that game?
Yeah, again, another top performance from Ben White. I mean, we were talking in our sort of preview for this game, and who we were kind of torn. You wanted Ben White to start, and I was sort of torn. But I think looking certainly without Saka, even going forward, he had certainly some much needed dynamism going forward. And he's always been a very good defender, 1v1, right? The only a grievance I would have to White as a defender is how conservative he can be at sometimes and not diving into tackles. But like I said, like you said, when you have Saliba behind you, who can often cover that space so well out wide, it's kind of a nice balance. White was terrific again, and that change after Doku came on. Obviously, Tomiyasu himself was jolted by Arteta, and it meant that Doku couldn't target Zinchenko as it initially looked like on the right-hand side, and moved across to White side. And I think he's given an unfair rep in a way, White, because he's often forced to literally defend 1v1 and not have Saka as sort of a 2v1 against the winger. So that's probably why he doesn't dive in as much. And I'm probably part of the one of people that are too harsh on him. But yeah, massive fan of White, and how sort of his mobility, getting up and down that right-hand side is
so athletic.
Yeah, and he's got like, I don't know how to describe it with White, but it's like that real upright running style that, like, once he gets going, there's no way you're stopping him.
I think there's a positive nonchalance with his game, and I mean that in a nice way. I kind of like how his temperament. I really like Benjamin White, and it's like you said, he kind of runs the right way. Yeah. He's just a very intelligent footballer, man.
And he has that as well, that nasty streak in him that, of course, you need in these games as well. Like he's well up for the fight.
I don't know what Foden did to him, but yeah, you're right. He just had it in for Foden. I don't know what Foden's done to him.
He probably absolutely loved the man marking job he had yesterday. But yeah, whenever the Arsenal players speak about him as well, they're saying, yeah, if you want one player on your side in the Arsenal team, it's Ben White. So another consistent, reliable as ever performance from White, and it's blocking to some respects Tomiyasu, whichever side he plays, out of the team. Another just as reliable and as consistent player in his own right, and he's a wonderful player to have in the squad. And at the moment, we've got a wealth of riches when everyone's fit in that position, with Timber, of course, as well, and Kivior, if you want to chuck his name in as well.
And I think you're bang on the money. And I think this is why, obviously, there are players that play on a regular basis. There is rotation options. There is surplus to requirements. But this is, and I know a bit of it is PR from Mikel Arteta, but this is why people need to listen about there's no starters and impactors and the importance of a squad. You know, the first couple of weeks in the season, it's one game a week. Every player that isn't in the team, I'm sure you've seen the Arsenal rhetoric and talking points. It's over for that player. Now we're in the thick of it, and injuries and high demanding games. You're seeing why you need a squad. And Tomiyasu, naturally, I don't think you're necessarily a quote-unquote starter in a Mikel Arteta team, but you're a very important closer. You know, if City, you know, did what maybe we expected when we took the lead and it was backs to the wall defending, that's where you see a bit of a different Tomiyasu in a poetic way, because I think he's quite conservative in comparison to all the other fullbacks. You saw a different sort of Tomiyasu. He's there like a striker. As I said, it was like anyone that, when Barcelona were in their prime, anyone that watched Dani Alves and Jordi Alba, especially if you got to see them at the Nou Camp like I did, it was quite an eye-opener, really. And I think I wonder how where Arteta and Pep got the same school of thought, because when their goalie had the ball, they're almost like strikers. And I saw a bit of that in Tomiyasu's game. I think that man is really underrated for his versatility, for his actually both-footedness, and for things like that. So I don't think you can sleep on stuff. Let's talk about our two centre-halves. Now, I know Haaland was more into those pockets against Saliba. That was more his man. But Haaland is a player that one man can't really just take credit for. The whole team, indirectly the midfield. Big up Gabriel Jesus as well. Just side note, I think the use to put him on the right-hand side was great, because had he have gone on the left, I think we would have been a bit too strong defensively over there with obviously Rice and whatnot. And then we wouldn't have been...
on the right.
Exactly. So I think on the right-hand side, that was great from Jesus. Saliba, though, man, I think we've got a very good centre-back. He's one of the best in the world in the Prem at the moment. He's got the potential to be the best. Him and Gabriel, I'm not going to say they're the best duo, but they're definitely up there. They're definitely top 5 there. I even say top 3, because off the top of my head, I can't really name centre-half duos like that, really. What did you make of the defensive performance of Gabriel and Saliba? Because for me with Saliba, it's off the ball. It's like, obviously you're playing Haaland. You've got to do the dark arts. You've got to barge him. You've got to do all these things. And Saliba was up for it. And he actually had a painkilling injection. So the scary thing is, Saliba put in a performance like that and he's not 100%. So It's crazy, and I'm happy we've got him here, man. What did you make of the two centre halves?
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of, especially with Saliba's front, we've kind of become used to it with Arsenal, seeing generally these athletic, physical monsters in our back line. You say Gabriel and Saliba and add Rice running back in the transition with that. Everything just seems to end up, whichever the ball comes, whichever team seems to attack us now and try and attack us in a more chaotic fashion, everything just seems to result in Arsenal winning the duel and it being recirculated again. Saliba, as you know, completely epitomizes that. And to say he had 100% pass accuracy, won every single one of his duels.
Hasn't been dribbled past this season in the Premier.
Exactly. Like you're really lost for words about him. And maybe the only thing you could say in our squad, like I said, if he was still to get injured, do we have that natural tower-like organizer presence at the back? I think we do internally, but it's just because he's so good, we maybe haven't seen it as much. Maybe Tomiyasu could do that role. I think in terms of on the ball and temperament, Timber can actually do the central centre back role quite well. But Saliba, like I said, again, imperious. And I'd love to see him, and I'd love to see us as a back line in a weird way against Liverpool straight away now. I was talking about how good we are, sort of embracing chaos defensively, winning our duels.
Saliba epitomizes that. You're bang on the money.
And Liverpool exemplify just that in attack. So I'd love to see their sort of front men trying to bully our back line, if you will. I think that would be an incredible occasion. That would be a real close affair as well. But yeah, Saliba, Gabriel, a lot of people come back to why on earth was Gabriel dropped early on in the season. They completely have a right, but it's not actually about Gabriel, whether he is Arteta rates him or not. It just depends which side.
It's just a moving part of the jigsaw, really.
It just depends which side we invert the fullback from. Because as we were doing with Partey from right back, Gabriel at times would have to be forced to defend as a left back in a back four and also attack that way. Arteta clearly didn't think he could quite do that and thought Timber was a better fit. But now when you have Zinchenko in that left back position, or whoever plays there, right, Gabriel is that outside left centre back, and in a back two, imperious.
Like you said, man, like the two monsters, I think they complement each other. Obviously, Gabriel's more of the aggressor. Mm-hmm. I think they both make each other look well. I think Gabriel, knowing you've got Saliba physically and also on top of Saliba's physical attributes, a bit like Benjamin White, he's got that calmness. I think that gives Gabriel the license to be that aggressor. And I also think with Gabriel kind of doing that, Gabriel kind of puts the centre forward, under pressure, and then Saliba mops up. And I think Saliba knows that with Gabriel being the aggressor, he can kind of be his own person. And I think, Martinelli typifies what Arteta does, and also Saliba, because I'm sure you remember a few years ago, people were saying, has Saliba got a future? Arteta didn't think he was ready. Every move's been justified. You even look at, I don't remember word for word, but Saliba actually said at Marseille that was his first kind of having to learn to play a high line and defending on the front foot. I still think Saliba's got a couple things in his game to get to that next level, but so far so good. I don't think Gabriel's given enough plaudits, with the greatest of respects to Saliba. I think it's easy to kind of praise Saliba for the obvious things we've said. I don't think Gabriel is quite as sexy and gracious, but I think his ball playing ability, I think his commitment to kind of play that wide centre back / left back role. I think, especially when we're trying to be a bit aggressive and punch balls in, I don't think he gets enough credit for that. So I think it's fantastic stuff. It's fantastic to have Declan Rice, fantastic to have Benjamin White. You mentioned Timber, that layer, the layer that Tomiyasu gives us, the duo that plays centre half, and the various combinations we might have to play, God forbid. But if something happens to Gabriel or Saliba, you've got Benjamin White, you've got Tomiyasu, assuming Timber's fit, you've got certain things that we can do there. What did you, I know we've kind of gone over it, but to kind of wrap up the defensive third talk, what did you make of Raya? Because I've offered my thoughts. What did you make of his kicking? What did you make of, his commitment to keep kicking? And do you actually feel like he is a better player all in all than Aaron Ramsdale? Or do you think it's in the same realm?
Yeah, I think we've, from what we were saying when I was on last time, we've been bang on the money so far in terms of the difference between Raya and Ramsdale is completely in confidence, not necessarily in quality. I think the only thing that separates them maybe qualitatively is how clean Raya can effortlessly launch those long balls forward.
Some of them balls into Jesus, I just had to go.
Yeah,
ridiculous.
And even if, like I said, as he grew into the game, he was very accurate yesterday. But even if he's not, it's that sort of effortless kicking that we've come used to seeing in an Edison, for example. But going back to your question, I couldn't quite believe what I was hearing on the commentary, to be honest, when they were calling Raya jittery. Because if you could criticize...
You want to take Gary Neville seriously, mate? You're doing yourself a disservice there.
I know. Because if you could criticize Raya at all right in that game, it was him being overcomposed, not jittery, right? And maybe taking too much time on the ball. But yeah, I think between him and Ramsdale, it's just a confidence issue, not a quality one. And at the moment, Raya transmits the right things to the team and to the back line, and has that sort of fundamentalism to keep playing the same way, not be frenetic, not that let the energy of the game seep into you. We may have seen Ramsdale, if he was under that same pressure that Alvarez gave him in sort of City's own man-man press against us on Sunday, then he might have started launching balls more erratically forward. Right, and
he wouldn't have stayed to what Arteta's committed to, man. He would have probably reverted back to type, with the greatest respect to Ramsdale.
Yeah, and without an out-and-out ball in Havertz and Nketiah sort of having to do that outlet job and sort of run the channels, Jesus as well, we probably wouldn't have retained ball and gone 50-50 possession-wise with City, and it would have been a lot difficult to get control of the ball and settle play right, make it not that disable Man City from pinning us in. So I think a lot of it stems from the goalkeeper. And, you know, just as sort of Edison and Raya are two sides of the same coin, you can go like Martinelli and Doku. They're two sides of the same coin for the two managers as well. So it was really good to see him sticking, and his temperament, like you said, that's probably the best part of his game. Coming for crosses as well. We still have to test him more as an out-and-out shot stopper, because last season was, I think, the first time in his career as a that he overperformed or prevented more XG than goals that actually went in. So that has to be tested. But I think all in all, it's been a pretty decent start to Arsenal life for Raya. Yeah.
I think I'm happy with Raya. I think obviously football fans need to understand that no players are going to intentionally make mistakes. Mistakes happen. Balls get lost on the transition. That is football. And naturally, not to absolve Raya for any mistakes fans think he has or hasn't made, but because of the way we play football, naturally, your pocket's going to get picked. You're going to have mistakes like what he should have done better, but lends away. I don't think currently Raya is clear of Ramsdale. I don't think it's clear there's a number one. I think it's his shirt, rightly so. We got a clean sheet against City. I do think personally, in the bigger games, like if I'm nitpicking, which I think Arteta is probably doing himself, I think Lens, you could have done better with that mistake. I think you made a great save against Spurs, but I think your kicking was probably the poorest I've seen in an Arsenal shirt currently. And I think City, you had a good game, but I can't forget about the moments initially, even though I'm not holding it against him. So I think the jury's out. I just think Arteta Raya is number one right now, and I wouldn't close out the door for Ramsdale, but you're going to face a fight to get it back. And at the end of the day, if Arsenal want to go to a certain place, difficult decisions are going to be made. You know, as you said, Gabriel might have to be dropped. Partey might not necessarily start games. We might get into a scenario where I don't see it, but Odegaard, Rice, and Saka, we're going into games against City. They might be, dispensable per se. I think people need to look at it as, and again, of course, there's a squad. Of course, there's a strongest 11, but it's more of a squad in different needs. Like Jorginho's strengths against City were a weakness against Spurs. So it's kind of, to a degree, accepting players. And on the topic of mistakes, this is what I like about Arsenal, because mistakes happen. I bet you've played football. I've played Sunday League. Sometimes you make mistakes. Your teammates need to get you out of it. As I said with Declan Rice, I don't know what Raya was doing in terms of diving, but his teammate got him out. And there'll be many times where other players make mistakes and Raya or Ramsdale, get them out of it. I would say, in relation to Ramsdale, I haven't seen Raya have to thrive in chaos, if that makes sense. I think that's what Ramsdale likes. I think kind of what you're saying, they're polar opposites in that in games where Raya has to, be more of a spectator, he thrives. I think that can actually be a weakness of Ramsdale's. And I think games like Anfield away last year, which I think people are quick to get at Ramsdale and question mark him. But when he saves our bacon, they don't really give him his plaudits. And the Anfield game shows that. Where was you at with Kai Havertz as a false nine? Because again, it worked against City and he got an assist. And for me, anytime he can get goals or assists or impact, even if it's just 5% more confidence, let's get there. I'm still not really convinced with the false nine options necessarily, apart from games to game. But yeah, where was you at with the impact specifically of Kai Havertz?
Yeah, I mean, I've said two positions that I want to see Havertz in an Arsenal shirt, or since he's signed. The only two positions that I see him succeeding in is as sort of that Rom Deuter type against real low blocks, or in the centre forward. And I've stayed consistent to that as the only real place I can see the effect of him in the shadow striker, but we need much more a second phase presence on the opposite side if that is the case. But going to the centre forward and going back to the City template, the City blueprint, that's absolutely it. Giving us that reliable outball to at times not have the toil of breaking such a good defensive team down, bypassing that second phase. You saw when he came on yesterday, of course, City were pressing us high. How many times we obviously would resort to going long to him. And even when he didn't win the headers, the knockdown.
Just the presence, like you said.
The space between the Manchester City midfield and defensive lines, we had always Martinelli or Declan Rice to sort of gobble up those second balls. And I was, as that sort of game progressed, as soon as Havertz came on, I was sort of yelling at my TV, the big space setup, which I've been preaching so much on my channel. And that bypassing of the second phase and how we sort of overload that right hand side. Often we see Partey or Jorginho, Jesus, Ødegaard, Havertz, and even Declan Rice all overloading and clustering one space.
You even saw Jorginho, sorry to cut you, but you even saw Jorginho being one of the first men to press as well against City, which you just, Arteta, you're a great manager. That's all I can say, man. There's a method to the madness.
Definitely. And it was what I've always preached is having that ability to go long to Havertz, winning those second balls, and sort of having Martinelli as that wide free man on the left-hand side after clustering that right-hand side. Just leave him out there, leave him free, almost cheating that City defence. That's the template. That's the Arteta template to try and beat Manchester City. And that's ultimately what Havertz gives us to an abundance. And it's about simplifying his role in an Arsenal shirt, not make him have to be any bigger toucher of the ball as an interior than he has to be, but making him link play with his back to goal exclusively, moving to space that other creates, trying to win those balls and be in the right place at the right time. That's really the Havertz key, and also the Martinelli relationship with him, keeping him as that wide free man. And it really helps then as we have sort of that right-hand sided overload. It's weird, this season we've seen an overload on the left-hand side to free up Saka on the right. Well, against Man City, it was the dichotomy switched, right? It was the opposite way around, and it was much more retention-based, and Jesus' role changed in retaining the ball as the game went on, not becoming that sort of transitionary weapon that we lacked, of course, with a front three of Nketiah, Jesus and Trossard. But it was that side to retain the ball, to tie things. And then you had that sort of link man in the pivot alongside Partey or Jorginho, whether that was Rice or Zinchenko, to then free up Martinelli to attack his man. So Havertz in the centre forward, I'm a massive proponent for, and I think that's where his best minutes in an Arsenal shirt have come from there so far. And I was always keen not to judge him too much before we had both Rice and Partey available against the top sides, because that's the closest we're going to see to a Xhaka Partey dynamic in terms of the controller and the secondary controller. And look, when we've seen that both times, Havertz has played in that centre forward against Manchester City. So for me, that's the City template. I think that's what Arteta looked into when he signed Havertz in the summer transfer window. This was something all sort of conceived in that summer window, if you will. Getting Declan Rice as well. We've already touched on his defensive, superiority in the game on Sunday, but going forward as well, a bit on being that second natural controller, taking the dependence off the team and how we control the games. But also a lot of our problems with our attacking dynamics this season, right, has been a left-hand side of Havertz and Martinelli having Nketiah in the centre forward who drifts right, and not having that real anchor and ball magnet on the left.
Not someone to hit the ball to and play 1-2s and stuff. Yeah,
literally, and be that anchor that the players can move around, and certainly Martinelli, who space invades, having that real ball magnet and anchor in the left interior, which balances out our attacking dynamics really well. That's of course what Rice does. He has the incision and the abundance in passing. to play that role really well. And also, what's very important is sort of the ball carrying and associative play to make sure that attacks don't break down. For me, I was imagining Havertz in Rice's role yesterday, and when we were running to a corner, when Martinelli maybe couldn't get completely free, or if Trossard got into a tricky situation and he played the ball into Rice, I was picturing Havertz in that situation, and the ball, realistically, there's a very good chance of it just getting turned over and Man City getting
just
the
like
ball.
against United.
Literally. And Rice in that role, he not only protects it, but he allows us to sustain attacks and not get the ball turned over, and not at the breakdown be wasteful. So that's something that he brings as well, not just on the defensive side of the game. Again, massive fan of him in that role, or the six. He can play and will play both, depending as well on what happens in the market midfield-wise going forward, how Arteta sees the future of Partey, the future of Jorginho, the future of El Neni. If you
could argue all three might be out the door next summer, or at least one, two of the three, in my opinion.
So you look at, does he prioritise bringing in some defensive midfield cover, or does he prioritise actually getting a proper second phase?
I think both, you know.
Yeah, probably in an ideal world, both. And maybe that would lend us some more forethought on where Rice's long-term position is. But the fact he can play both to such a top standard is testament to the sort of player we have on our hands.
And we've only scratched the surface with Declan Rice and his passing, man. I think in relation to, I guess, what he does in the opponent's half of the pitch with a football, I think you'll only see the benefits, real benefits next season, and a real uptake next season. I look at Grealish, it's almost like, obviously Arteta signs players and they impact immediately, but it's almost like the first year is the apprenticeship phase, and then next year you kind of know your job and how you tie in. So I think big up Declan Rice. Who would your man of the match be? And I only ask this because I think there's men of the match. I think obviously if you beat City, keep a clean sheet, everybody's had to have put it in. I think you could give it Declan Rice. I think you could give it Martinelli. I think you could give it Gabriel and Saliba. I think you could give it Odegaard based on the second half. I actually think you could give it Jesus. Who would you give it to?
I was saying this on my channel. I would give it to Declan Rice for how encompassing he was at both ends of the pitch. But it's so hard in such a team performance when, like we say, it has only been won by very fine margins. But yeah, I gave it to Declan Rice for his his output and his efforts across the whole game. How useful he is. Not just when we go really aggressively in the press and man marking B Silva, but yeah, in that more passive block, and how important he was at shutting down the spaces in between the lines that City really depended on. How there was no central progression the whole game for Manchester City, right? Foden had to increasingly drift deeper. Again, overloading the deep build up, but only having Guardiola as that free man in attack.
Good battle him and Jesus had down the right hand side, if I'm honest.
Because at times Jesus was tasked with doing a man marking job when we were really not penned in, but sitting really deep. And there was no way through the middle. There was no second ball gobbles. Of course, that was Gabriel and Saliba's job. But what Rice does, and what we lost against Spurs when Jorginho came on for him, was that policing of the spaces in between the lines where Maddison loves to pick up the ball, right? And that's why Maddison was anonymous in the first half, but so instrumental for Spurs in the second. So yeah, Declan Rice, my man of the match. But do you have anyone, I don't know, do you have anyone different?
Oh, I think we had some... Oh, am I back?
Yeah, you're back, man.
Technical difficulties, man. We're having such a great chat, man. But yeah, I heard everything you said. I hear you with Declan Rice, because you got to win your midfield battles. I do partly want to give it to Gabriel or Saliba, just to kind of, and Benjamin White, to reward the defense. Because if you keep Haaland quiet or their attackers, then what can you really say? I actually want to give it to Gabriel Jesus, because I feel you was one of them that was on it from the start. But I'm gonna go with Martinelli, because you was infectious. You know, you did what Mikel Arteta told you to do, impact the game. I think his positiveness and his embracing of chaos kind of, you know, filtered to the rest of the team. Obviously, he got the goal, so there's a bit of a match winning this. So I'd lean towards Martinelli, but it's probably men of the match. It's probably one where if it was a trophy, you have to cut up all the pieces and just let everybody have a piece. And do you know what? That's what you need. You need a collective, because we've been here many years as an Arsenal fans watching Arsenal players. If one person wasn't quite at it, we don't get the result. Or if we've lost, one player, like typically Bukayo Saka, would be on it, but not everybody else. It's nice to not be able to really pick. And it's nice this season that early doors we've been able to nitpick about performances, about off the ball, about on the ball, about final third, about defensive third, about what Mikel Arteta is doing. And this is the scenario and the realm we wanted to be in. This is almost privileged problems. This is coming a long way from definitely a few years ago when we was waiting until West Brom in the cup, I believe, to score in total, really, when we're missing a whole month and not being able to have goal of the month campaigns, really. So I'm all for that. My last question for you would be, who do you think has the highest ceiling at Arsenal? Do you think it's Martinelli, Saka, Odegaard, William, Saliba, or any of the names I haven't said? Because a very difficult question, and one that I don't think anyone, including myself, can really answer.
I think in terms of how roles and potential...
Or even Declan Rice.
I think in terms of roles and how responsibilities can broaden, right, in the Arsenal side. I still see Bukayo Saka, because I still see him in terms of ceiling and his most devastating best when he's allowed to drift inside. And if we were able to add more consistent dynamism on the right and him able to do that, I think he'd be even more instrumental, certainly as a creative force than he is now. So I want to say Bukayo Saka, but there's in terms of roles and responsibilities, there's so many players who have scope for increased roles, right? Timber, of course, we see he can do a plethora of jobs for the side already. In terms of elevating the team to the next level, and outballing Kai Havertz as a striker, I still think in terms of having a blueprint and a template that kills any sides in the world, embraces that chaos, is invaluable as well. Rice, whether he plays as an 8 or a 6. And it's something that, I've spoken about a lot, and which players have zones of influence in this Arsenal team. And for Martin Odegaard to go to the next level and broadening his own zone of influence,
You've been very vocal on that.
Yeah, being that second phase midfielder that he can be at times, because he's such a brilliant footballer. He should be still the beating heart of this Arsenal team. And that's something that may or may not happen in the future. I think a side note on Odegaard is, I think, him as that sort of main player to take up the mantle of Xhaka, of sort of putting balls into the box and playing those half space crosses, or those
playing in that pivot, man. I've been so vocal about this, man. You'd almost rob Odegaard of, you know, probably some goals and assists and being in the final third, but our team would get greater impetus. Obviously he's not like for like, but if I had to like say who he could be like, I think you could do the Santi Cazorla kind of role in the middle of the park for us, and I think that is for you. I think you've got the intelligence. I think the only thing I demand more of Odegaard is, I do see you, and I again, you know, I've been like yourself. I'm a big fan, but I think you could run the show, man. I think when we look at games like City, I want to see Odegaard's name, because in the second half he was down for it, really. So I think you're bang on the money.
But it's not a when we look at the game against City, it's not an Odegaard necessarily a criticism, because that at the moment is the job he's doing in the team in a very finite amount of space.
Pressing king as well.
Exactly, and that's what people don't take into the mind when they maybe are criticisms on him. Physically, he's so well developed at such a young age, and he's such an integral part of our press. How clever he is, how intense he is. So it's maybe the idea of risk reward in terms of broadening his scope a little bit. But yeah, I was talking about. You were talking about how he may have to lay out slightly on the goal scoring, but I don't think that is completely the end of the world. He drifts into the box to score goals anyway. He'd still be allowed to do that whether he's playing in a pivot, as we roam higher and settle possession. And also, we have goals everywhere in this team. This is a team that broke the record over a season last year in the Premier League for Arsenal. And I want to see him put more crosses into the box, as he is that player to take up that.
Get some more assists doing that as well, you're right.
I mean, De Bruyne last season in the Premier League put in 6.42 crosses into the opposition box per 90. Of course, he can under and overlap, But Ødegaard, as a comparison this season, has just 0.74 crosses into the opposition box. And when we have done it, when we've aimed at the back post to have a back there, it's worked. It's such an effective way of breaking an opposition down, especially if they like really collapse into the pockets, are really aggressive and physical, right? It's such an effective way because you don't always need to be taller or bigger than the opposition side if you ghost in off the shoulder. So
look at the goal Jesus almost scored against Spurs, where it was like an acute angle, stuff like that.
And that sort of is the only way we can make as a completely complete attacking unit. So there's still a lot of growth possible in this Arsenal team. So that's the exciting thing. We haven't even touched on Emil Smith-Rowe or Fabio Vieira, and sort of players on the periphery that still have a lot of potential legs in them. So yeah, that's me.
I think you're bang on the money with that. And I think, that's one thing. I don't think it's a demand of Mikel Arteta. You see it with our corners. We don't really put them into the box. We do, obviously, from time to time, do standard crosses or standard set pieces. But I don't think Arteta believes he's got the physicality to do that. And I don't necessarily want us to become a crossing side. But if we could have the scope for it, as you alluded to, that could be an extra 5, 10 goals. That could obviously affect whether we get more 3 points or not and ultimately win. I think the potential thing is a very interesting one. I would say normally, I would say in no order, Bukayo Saka, Odegaard, William Saliba, because I think those are the three that could be real special. I do think Saliba one day will be playing for Real Madrid, but I'm actually going to give it to Martinelli. And why I give it to Martinelli is not to critique the other players, and I'm not saying they're not hungry and they haven't got drive, but I just think his drive to want to improve and make the difference is ridiculous. I'm not comparing him to Cristiano Ronaldo, but he seems to have that kind of element and drive. And I think sometimes, like in life, you can overperform. The smartest student isn't necessarily the one that's the highest achiever. It's the guy that, worked his ass off, essentially. But one thing I do like is that they all play for Arsenal Football Club. They've all been contracted. And that's another thing I give credit to Arsenal as well, because very easily in previous years, Saka, Saliba, Odegaard, Saliba in particular, because that was the one that was probably a delay. These contracts could have ran into the season. Every game he's staying, he's going, he's this, that, and the other. Now, exactly. So unfortunately, if these players ever want to go, we're in a scenario where we can get ridiculous money. As you see, bro, in the game in this day and age, whatever a player's worth and the fee are completely different. They're all inflated. There's no reason why Arsenal can't get stupid money, why we couldn't sell one of these players, not that I want them to leave yet, for 100 million and ultimately make us better, man. But yeah, bro, it's been a fantastic chat with you. Again, I know you said it earlier, but let them know once again where they can find you, the content you do and the content you've got to come. Make sure you're subscribing to Harvey as well, people. The man makes elite content, as you've seen in the last 50-odd minutes.
Well, again, like I said last time I was on here, it's an honor to be on here.
It's an honor to have you, mate.
I just love having a chat with Arsenal enthusiasts, right? But yeah, YouTube channel, just Harvey Gratian. And yeah, I'm loving making videos, and thank you so much for the very kind words. I can only reciprocate and say the exact same for you. And yeah, I'm gonna continue making videos here and when I can, and hopefully keep having chats and conversations with you.
Nah, man, you're here to stay, man. I've got all the time in the world for intellectual football fans. And one thing that actually attracted me to your videos is obviously you're an Arsenal fan, but you can tell when someone's a fan of the game and a true purist of the game, because you're not robbed via the biased lens and stuff. So it's always fantastic to have convos with you. And don't worry, mate, there's plenty of vids to come. Again, people, I can't imagine you don't know who Harvey is, but again, in the title at the time of this video coming out, all you have to do is click his name in the hyperlink, subscribe, leave comments, get his subscribers up, get his followers up, get his all these things up, people. So yeah, man, Harvey, I'm gonna let you get out of here. People, let us know everything, your opinions on everything we've discussed. So yeah, man, it's been a great chat, and hopefully in the build up to the Chelsea game and post Chelsea, we can have some more fantastic chats.
Absolutely.
Come on, my guy, let me let you get out of here. So yeah, like, comment, subscribe to the channels. Peace.
There's always just that active red flag, defending. I think it's like